Okay, once again, I'm Mike Truax. I want to welcome everyone to the August meeting of the 1904 World's Fair Society. This is the 117th anniversary of the World's Fair, and it's also our 35th anniversary this year. Tonight, we're going to see a new presentation about the World's Fair and about a foreign country building. It's also one of the few foreign buildings that survived 1904 that still stands today. New Society member Lenore Lynam will tell us the history of the Swedish Homestead building at the fair. First, I want to ask, are there any new members or any guests or non-members? If you'll kind of put your hand up in the air and give us a wave, I would like to see, the new members and welcome you. There's some down in the corner, Ann Samuelson. And I know Lenora has invited some people from her Kansas home city and state that she works with. And have we gotten over 50 yet? No, we're still at 49. Well, we want to welcome you and urge you to become a member. If you want to enter your name in the chat room, we might even be able to send you a bulletin. If you want to take a look at our monthly bulletin and try to get you to join. There's membership forms on the Society's webpage, which is www.1904worldsfairsociety.org. Next, a couple of announcements. First, read your bulletin and keep an eye on your Society email for news. Be sure and visit the Society website. Our meetings are posted there with current information about the upcoming meetings. It also has a merchandise and mail order form and several years worth of pictures if you want to see what all of us Society folks look like 4 or 5, 8 or 9 years ago. We've continued to post our 2021 virtual meetings on YouTube for viewing by members and the public. We've sent an email out to members with details of how they can see these presentations, and all except for the most recent 2 meetings are available for the public to find and see. Feel free to tell your friends about them, that they just search for 1904 World's Fair Society monthly meetings. The 2 most recent meetings we're going to keep just for members only as a member benefit. Be sure and check out a Society's Facebook page, which is the World's Fair and Appreciation Group. There's a constant flow of questions, answers, pictures, postings, and links to other sites with information about the World's Fair. The Society's Instagram page is also filled with a lot of unusual pictures about the fair that Holly Childress keeps up. Well worth a visit or even following it just to see some unusual fair pictures. Every once in a while, she'll find one that I've never seen before. I also want to tell everyone, and I'll more about this later, next month we're going to have our picnic on September 11th. And I want you to think, I've got a few questions I want to ask members, especially those that are likely to come. I'm hopeful of having a pretty normal picnic with hot dogs and beverages. Masks will be optional. I'd be willing to bet that 90% of us or maybe more are vaccinated, and we'll have servers with gloves to be able to serve food and stuff like that. So I'm open for some discussion on that. I'd like to offer a couple of reminders about Zoom meetings for those who haven't used Zoom before. If you have questions for our presenter, please type them in the chat room. There's a chat panel that will appear if you put your mouse on the bottom of the Zoom window or move it around. You'll see a chat button at the bottom, and it will pop up a little panel on the right that you can type your question into, and David will read those off at the end. Since we're recording, I see a lot of nice, happy faces there with good backgrounds. If you do have to leave, you might, click on the video button and turn your video off. I forgot to do that. It's either last month or the month before. And one other thing, if you do have a phone nearby, you might want to mute it even though you're muted, because you can always accidentally unmute yourself. Let's see. Finally, you can also upload a photo of yourself, as I see Carol Welch has done, and Nancy Vortreed, so that if you're, up and down and kind of doing other things, you still have a nice picture to show us. So let's start with the presentation proper. Verify that I am recording. Yes, I am. I'd like to set the stage for this presentation and describe what took place at the World's Fair 117 years ago. On August 11th, 1904, it was a Thursday. The fair was in full swing, attendance was booming, and special events were occurring every day. Fortunately, the 1904 summer had been a relatively mild summer as regarding temperatures, at least for St. Louis, mostly in the high temperatures in the 80s, which probably made the ladies and gentlemen who wore jackets all the time much more comfortable. Yesterday, 63 of the 122 touring cars from the major U.S. cities on the East Coast arrived in downtown St. Louis. Tomorrow, over 200 cars from St. Louis would join them in a mile-long auto parade from downtown out to the World's Fairgrounds and all through the fairgrounds for about half an hour. So 117 years ago, on August 11th and 12th, it was Anthropological Field Days. This was an event often highlighted as a dark stain on both the Olympics and the fair. The Anthropology Days was a concept organized by James Sullivan, Department of Physical Culture, and William McGee, Director of Anthropology. They wanted to compare 1904 athletes and the primitive people that had been brought to the fair from all over the world, and they wanted to compare them in terms of speed, skill, and endurance so that they could scientifically show how advanced civilization had progressed. But since most contests were modern athletic events, they produced the expected outcome. The contests held in the stadium included archery, baseball throwing, shot put, running, broad jumping, weightlifting, pole climbing, and tugs of war for a crowd of approximately 10,000 people. The athletes won most of the contests, as you might have expected, with their specialized training and techniques. However, there were some uncivilized peoples that did well in some events, such as pole climbing and archery. No medals were awarded, and they were not part of the Olympic Games. They were just kind of a scientific experiment, since they had the athletes here and the people from all over the world. And a final reminder, if you have any questions, please enter them into the Zoom panel, so the chat panel, so that they will be monitored and relayed by David Meyer. And now it's time for our presentation. I'd like you to tell you a bit about our presenter. Lenore Lynam is a lifelong Kansan, born in Northeast Kansas. She attended Bethany College in Lindsborg, Kansas, which is known as Little Sweden for its large Swedish heritage. She's been associated with the Swedish building and many other historical buildings in Lindsborg ever since. During her career, she's been a board member for the Smoky Valley Historical Association and worked for the McPherson County Old Mill Museum. She is now a senior archivist for a new nonprofit organization that is caring for the Lindsborg historical buildings. And several people from that new organization are our guests tonight. She also worked with Diane Rademacher over 20 years ago when Diane was researching the buildings and structures from the World's Fair for the book that she was writing called Still Shining, Discovering Treasures of the 1904 World's Fair. And this is a contemporary book I would heartily recommend if you want to learn about the fair and things that are still out there and just a lot of facts. It's probably as full of factual information about the fair as any book could be at only 110 pages or something like that. So with that, I would like to introduce Lenore Lynam for her presentation about the Swedish building.
Hi, thank you, Mike. And like Mike said, I am a board member for the Smoky Valley Historical Association, and I'm also the archivist at the Lindsborg Old Mill and Swedish Heritage Museum, which is the current home of the 1904 World's Fair Swedish Pavilion. The museum is currently in a transition period, and I will talk a little bit more about that at the end of my presentation. I'm excited to be here tonight to talk to you about the 1904 World's Fair Swedish Pavilion, although perhaps a little bit nervous at talking about a World's Fair building to the World's Fair Society. But your president, Mike, has assured me that there's nothing to worry about, that that I will be presenting you with new information about the building, because there were so many buildings and so many aspects to the fair that he's sure that I will have new information for you. I would also like to thank Mike for sharing with me the link to the St. Louis Public Library glass slide negative collection. And that is just truly an amazing, amazing collection of photos. So thank you for that. I've included some of those images in my presentation tonight. Some of the images that I have in my presentation, I got out of Swedish American magazines and newspapers from 1904. So they're not the image quality that I would like, but it was the best I could do, and with what I had to work with. In 1998, the Old Mill Museum received a Heritage Trust Fund grant from the state of Kansas to do some restoration work on the Swedish Pavilion. So myself, along with two of my volunteers, traveled to St. Louis to do research on the building. We spent time at St. Louis Public Library Special Collections and Missouri Historical Society. Also during that visit, we met with and became acquainted with two of your members, Yvonne Seuss and Diane Rodmacher. We had kept in touch for a while after that, but I'm sorry to say that in recent years, we had kind of lost touch. So I was excited when Diane contacted me and wanted me to do this program. Hopefully we can renew that relationship going forward with our organizations. In preparing for this presentation, gave me the chance to go back and really review a lot of that research that I had done back in '98. Some of it I had forgotten, but also I actually came across some new information about the Swedish Pavilion that I didn't know before. So thank you for that opportunity. And in this world of pandemic and Zoom, we've all learned, I think by now, how to use Zoom. And I have participated in quite a few Zoom presentations, but I have never been a presenter. So this is something new for me. So hopefully everything goes off without a hitch. So I'm going to go to my share screen. And hopefully you're all seeing what I see. Okay, so
there's PowerPoint.
There is PowerPoint. That is good. So this is the Swedish Pavilion as it sits today on the grounds of the Lindsborg Old Mill Museum. It has had quite the journey in its 117-year history, traveling from Sweden to St. Louis and then to Lindsborg, Kansas. It is truly amazing that the building is still standing today. The Louisiana Purchase Exposition was, by all accounts, the most beautiful, educational, and exciting of all the international exhibitions of global culture ever presented. The world was at peace, and technology promised a future beyond all imagination. 62 nations and 44 states brought their treasures and their civilizations to St. Louis to display. On August 20th, 1901, President McKinley issued a proclamation inviting all the countries of the world to take part in the fair. The fair planners hoped to promote friendly relations and the exchange of knowledge throughout the people of the world. Thousands of advertisements were distributed, delegations were formed to arrange for exhibits and to promote interest and enthusiasm all over the world. The Swedish government in December of 1901, through a letter from W.W. Thomas, the foreign minister to Sweden and Norway, declined the invitation to have a national pavilion in St. Louis due to the considerable expense involved. Also, I think it was partly World Fair fatigue. This was the golden age of world fairs and exhibitions, and Sweden had participated in many of those. And as kind of a side note here, in case you didn't know, at this time in 1904, Sweden and Norway shared one monarch. Norway had lost a brief war with Sweden in 1814 and was forced to enter into a union with Sweden. This lasted until June 7th of 1905. The Swedish government, however, did appropriate funds for exhibitions in the Education and Fine Arts Group at the Exposition, which would be held in public buildings. Charles Kolstad, the World's Fair Special Commissioner to Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, and John Hammer, the honorary resident representative of the World's Fair in Sweden and Norway, worked together to try and secure Sweden's participation in the fair. John Hammer had been Sweden's representative at the World's Fair in Chicago and in Paris. The World's Fair Bulletin of January 1902 stated that the ex-residents of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark in St. Louis have started a movement for the erection of a Scandinavian building at the fair. The intention being to make it a central meeting place for all Scandinavian. Again, in December of 1902 and May of 1903 were communications with President Francis of the World's Fair, stating that Sweden would not participate in the fair with a national building. The August 1903 issue of the World's Fair Bulletin also had the following statement from King Oscar. "My people are leaving for America rapidly enough now, it seems to me, without making a special exhibit to attract them to your country." Starting in 1867 and lasting well past 1900, Sweden lost 1 in 5 of its population due to immigration. The Swedish Pavilion at the fair was the result of a great national subscription or fundraiser in Sweden, or in today's terms, it was a GoFundMe. More than 15,000 Swedes contributed. The building was truly a gift from the people of Sweden to their fellow countrymen in the United States. It was also a way for Sweden to say thank you for the aid that had been sent by Swedish Americans in 1902 and 1903, as severe weather conditions struck northern Sweden, resulting in widespread famine. The fundraising effort was organized by the Swedish press in early November 1903. It was then that a committee was formed to organize the efforts, of which Baron Carl Carlson Bonde was the president. Baron Bonde belonged to one of the oldest Swedish families of nobility. He was a member of parliament and president of the General Export Association. Other members included Carl Jansen, a Stockholm banker, and Gustav Goldberg, a well-known editor and author in Sweden, and John Hammer. The first week of November 1903, articles began appearing across the country in Sweden, asking for donations for the pavilion. To await the final result of the fundraising effort at this late date and still have a building ready for St. Louis by May 1 would have been impossible if it had not been for Carl Jansen, the Stockholm banker. Carl Jansen was the treasurer of the organization, and he took it on his own shoulders to advance the funds necessary. So without his support, the building would have never become a reality. Ferdinand Boberg, a well-known Swedish architect, volunteered his services in designing the building. Boberg had designed such buildings as the Stockholm City Post Office, the Gavle, Sweden Fire Station, as well as exposition buildings for Paris 1889 and Stockholm 1897. Boberg also designed all the furnishings and the furniture for the pavilion, of which Joseph Sachs, or the Nordiska Kompaniet, donated those to the pavilion. In August 1903, the Swedish American World's Fair Society in St. Louis was formed. The membership was over 200, and the purpose was to ascertain the numbers and, as far as possible, the names of those who would be coming to the fair from Sweden and from Finland. Committees were formed to arrange and find suitable boarding places for those visitors. November 8, 1903, the St. Louis Dispatch reported that the first drawings of the Swedish building have been received. The building followed the design of the traditional Swedish manor house or herrgård. It had a main building and 2 side wings. It was much smaller in comparison to the other buildings at the fair. The building was to be located on Administration Avenue near the Austrian Pavilion and across from the Chinese official building. And up here at the top, I have this pavilion circled. Here is the Belgium Pavilion. Back here is the administration building. And then here is the map of the fair with the pavilion down here. For those of you for the World's Fair Society, this is the Pike. I'm sure that you're all familiar with the fairgrounds. On December 1st, King Oscar's name day, the Swedes of St. Louis, to the number of 600, and many prominent Swedes from other states participated in the ceremony to dedicate the building site of the Swedish Pavilion. The committee for the dedication was made up of prominent St. Louis Swedish Americans. They were Eric Palmquist, Nils Grant, C.A. Ekströmer, H.A. Dialli, and Reverend C.J. Rennert. A decorated speaker stand and 2 tall flagstaffs were erected on the site. Mr. C.A. Ekströmer, chairman of the committee on the dedication, introduced Mrs. John Okerson. She was the wife of Colonel Okerson, and he was on the American section of the Swedish Building Committee. She pulled the halyards and flung to the breezes the stars and stripes while America was sung. Charles Kolstad then formally applied to President Francis for a site for the building. President Francis said in his speech, on behalf of the Exposition Company, to present to the building committee this very eligible building site on the grounds of the Louisiana Purchase Exposition. The site was then accepted by Dr. Carl Aaron Swenson, president of Bethany College, Lindsborg, Kansas. Charlotte Dialli, daughter of H.A. Dialli of the dedication committee, then unfurled the Swedish flag. Then, with a nickeled hammer, Joseph Roger of Stockholm, Sweden, climbed the mast and nailed the yellow cross of Sweden to the top, cutting the halyards just below the nail. As the colors stiffened into the breeze, a cheer arose from the crowd, and the chorus sang the Swedish national hymn. The hammer was then inscribed and sent to King Oscar of Sweden. In the background of this photo, you can see the Palace of Transportation. This was followed by speeches by Dr. Carl Aaron Swenson, Mr. Kolstad, President Francis, and Dr. Gustav Andreen of Augustana College, Rock Island, Illinois. And they are all the ones standing up here on the platform. Because of the cold weather, the dedication was then moved inside to the Planters Hotel, where a banquet was served that evening. Members of the American section of the Swedish Building Committee were as follows: Russell Spandholt, Secretary; J.A. Okerson, President, and he was also with Mississippi River Commission; Reverend Carl Aaron Swenson, Bethany College, Lindsborg, Kansas; C.W. Kolstad from New York, he was the World's Fair Commissioner to Sweden; Charles A. Smith, he was a lumberman from Minneapolis, Minnesota. He was also reported to be the richest man of Swedish descent living in the U.S., and D.C. Nugent, who was the local treasurer. This group was charged with the task of raising the funds for the maintenance and the upkeep of the building at the fair. It was reported that they raised a little over $1,000. The pavilion was prefabricated at Ekman's Mechanical Company factory in Sundbyberg, Sweden, which is just north of Stockholm. Upon completion, it was taken apart, boxed, and shipped to the U.S. It left Sweden on January 23rd, 1904. The building arrived at the Port of Baltimore and then was transported by train to St. Louis. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch, March 27th of 1904, reported that the materials for the building had been on the ground for a month, but the work was delayed by the fact that other parts were delayed in the freight congestion in East St. Louis. The contractor, A.J. Naren, and a crew of Swedish workmen reconstructed the building from its wooden skeletal frame to its painted board and batten exterior. So here are several photos of the work crew that came along to build the Swedish Pavilion. Here are photos of the building during construction at the fair. Most of these are from the St. Louis Public Library glass slide negative collection, and they are just truly amazing. So here you have the Belgian Palace here in the background. So here's the pavilion going up. And like I said, these are from the St. Louis Public Library glass slide negative collection. So for those you don't know that some of these were water damage. So that's what you're seeing here on the edges is the water damage to the negatives. This photo, which also appeared in a Swedish American newspaper, stated that this was just 10 days before the opening of the fair, which was April 30th. The main building measured 80 by 48 feet, and it gave the appearance of a story-and-a-half Swedish farmhouse. May 3rd, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reported that Sweden's building has sprung up within the last week as if just by magic. Ferdinand Boberg, the architect, arrived 2 weeks before the opening. Boberg was frantic trying to get the building finished on time. A newspaper reported that he was so panicked that he went next door to the Belgian Pavilion trying to lure away some of their workers, particularly to lay the turf before opening day. As far as we know, he was unsuccessful in his attempt. So this is another construction photo. You can see up here on the balcony, you can see some lumber. You see a ladder over here against the side and the workmen standing out there in front. This is probably was taken just about the same time because again, you're seeing the lumber up here on the balcony, a workman here on a ladder. The Swedish Pavilion was not quite ready for opening day of the fair, which was April 30th. So this is a view taken from the balcony of the Swedish Pavilion, looking at the, watching the parade go by on opening day. You can see here in the background that the Belgian Pavilion is not ready. So this is perhaps why Boberg could not lure away any of their workers. In addition to construction workers, gardeners also followed from Sweden to arrange flower beds of native flowers. This photo, which also appeared in a Swedish American magazine, identifies this as the opening day of the fair as April 30th. Opening day ceremonies for the Swedish Pavilion took place on May 9th of 1904. Ferdinand Boberg, and this is him here in the front row with his wife. The architect hoisted up the Swedish flag and in a brief speech presented the pavilion to Dr. N.G. Langerstadt, Sweden's Commissioner General, and the other Swedish representatives at the fair. And this is Langerstadt over here. Stating that he had hoped it would remind all Swedish American visitors of their native land and that it would serve to strengthen the bond of friendship between the United States and Sweden. Colonel J.A. Ogerson, here in the front row with his wife, Resident Commissioner for Sweden, accepted the building on behalf of Dr. Langerstadt and extended a cordial welcome to all visitors present. Reverend C.J. Rennert of St. Louis, over here, responded on behalf of the local Swedish representatives, thanking architect Boberg for his services and assured him that the sweet memories of Sweden would be brought afresh to every Swedish American visiting the building. And here is another photo of opening day festivities. So in addition to construction workers and gardeners that had been sent from Sweden, young men and women dressed in traditional Swedish clothing arrived to greet visitors to the building. And here are a couple more photos of the building after it was finished, as it said on the fairgrounds. This one is taken from the Chinese building looking back across to the Swedish Pavilion. Called the Swedish Farmhouse, the Swedish Pavilion consisted of one large building with two small side wings. The board and batten siding was painted gold with white trim and green shutters. The fence was white with touches of green. In the middle of the courtyard was a 100-foot high flagpole with a 24-foot long flag that had been donated by W.W. Thomas. The interior of the building consisted of one large hall with a gabled roof, decorated mainly in white. The furniture was made of Swedish oak and was stained a bright red, and the rugs were steel blue in color. A life-size marble bust, King Oscar, was opposite the entrance, which is over here. And it sat on a blue cloth-covered pedestal. So in the building, there were samples of Swedish pottery. There were photos of Swedish scenery, as well as pictures of interesting events in Swedish history that covered the wall space. There were bookcases filled with works of Swedish authors, and there were writing materials available for visitors. One wing were the private offices of Dr. Langerstadt, of Sweden's Royal Commissioner General, and his secretary, Mr. Ernst Lundblad, and the other was for the Swedish press. And this is actually Dr. Langerstadt here and his secretary, Ernst Lundblad. The Golden Book, which was located under the bust of King Oscar over here on the right, listed the names of the 15,000 Swedes who had contributed to the fundraising effort. In a report to King Oscar, the building cost 87,923 kronor and 30 öre, or about $27,000. In today's money, that was a little over $800,000. Swedish Day was held June 24th at the fair, which in Sweden is the traditional Midsummer's Day. 6 committees were formed to plan this grand celebration, which was headed by Mr. C.A. Ekströmer of St. Louis. The Lund University Student Choir arranged their itinerary so that they would be in St. Louis for the celebration. Early in the afternoon, a procession formed on the Plaza of Orleans near the parade entrance. It was led by Grand Marshal Peter Hemmingson, followed by a platoon of Jefferson Guards, the Haskell Indian Band, the Lund University Chorus, carriages carrying prominent members of Swedish American families of St. Louis, automobiles with Swedish children, Swedish American World's Fair Society and Band, the Finnish National Society of St. Louis, the Swedish National Society and Band of St. Louis, the Scandia Club of St. Louis. This was followed by a company of Swedes from all parts of the country. They marched to Administration Way, past the Swedish Pavilion and the Administration Building onto Festival Hall. Thousands of spectators lined the boulevards viewing the parade and enthusiastically cheering the procession. The party began with the welcome speech by Mr. Ekströmer, followed by President Francis and the Lund Choir. In the evening, the Lund Choir gave a concert to a sold-out house at the Music Hall at the corner of Olive and 13th. The next event at the Swedish Pavilion was a by invitation only reception held on September the 24th. And in doing the research for this, I really could not find out too much about what this reception was about, except all these important Swedish Americans were in attendance. They included Dr. Langerstadt, Mr. and Mrs. Ogerson, Mr. and Mrs. Dan Nugent, Senator and Mrs. Erickson from Iowa, and Mr. and Mrs. Ekströmer. On November the 25th, President Roosevelt and the World's Fair President David Francis made their visit to the Swedish Pavilion. Then, on December the 1st, 1904, the fair closed. W.W. Thomas, U.S. Ambassador to Sweden and Norway, purchased the Swedish Pavilion for $2,000. Thomas then donated it to Bethany College at Lindsborg in memory of his good friend, Dr. Carl Aaron Swinson. There had been some discussion as to who Thomas purchased the building from. After finding this letter in the Bethany College archives, I believe he bought it from the Swedish government because he was in Stockholm at the time that he wrote the letter to the new president of Bethany College, Ernst Lundblad. So Dr. Carl Aaron Swinson, president of Bethany College, died very suddenly, February 16th of 1904 of a heart attack while on a trip to California. He was only 46 years old. There are some that think that he was positioning himself to run for US president. I guess we'll never really truly know the answer to that. After working so hard on the American side of the building committee for the Swedish Pavilion, he never actually got to see the building. So just very briefly, a little bit about Lindsborg. Lindsborg is a Swedish community in the heart of Kansas. It was settled by a group of approximately 100 people, primarily from Vermland, Sweden, in 1869, led by Pastor Olaf Olsson. They were soon followed by another group led by Reverend A.W. Dahlstein from the Glensburg, Illinois area. Population by 1900 was approximately 1,400 people, with the majority of those being Swedish. So the area of Swedish settlement in central Kansas stretches from approximately the city of McPherson north to the city of Salina, with Lindsborg in the center. There is certainly more areas of Swedish settlement in Kansas, but this is the primary one here in central Kansas. The Bethany Commercial Club and the Bethany Male Chorus raised the funds to transport the building from St. Louis to Lindsborg. The building was shipped from St. Louis on March 15th of 1905. The Lindsborg record, November 24th of 1905, reported that the Swedish Pavilion is rapidly assuming proportions. The tower roof is nearly on and work on the interior has begun. And here's another photo of it sitting on the Bethany College campus. And here is a photo of it sitting on the Bethany College campus with Old Main in the background. Old Main for many years was the tallest building between Kansas City and Denver, standing over 5 stories high. The Swedish Pavilion was used for a wide variety of things over the years that it was on the college campus. The first being an art gallery / museum in 1906. The Lindsborg News reported April 6, 1906, that the museum, or part of it that is, was moved down to the Swedish Pavilion last Saturday as to make it more convenient for visitors. June 22nd of 1906, the Swedish Building Committee reported that a genuine old country Swedish entertainment is being prepared, which will be given in the Swedish Pavilion in the afternoon. Lunches will be served in the building in the old-fashioned Swedish way. G.N. Malm is the chairman, and this is G.N. Malm here on the backside. This was probably to raise funds for the building, but the article did not specifically state that. And the west wing of the building became home to the Bethany Male Chorus. The Lindsborg newspaper continued to report on various groups, both community and college, that were using the building for their events. Starting in 1912 and until the early 1920s, the college used the building for the domestic science classes, or home ec. In 1921, the building became the home of a girls' recreation center. The Bethany College catalog referred to it as expression and physical culture, and one wing was converted into the college hospital. 1921 to 1923 brought many changes to the Swedish Pavilion. The tile roof was taken off and it was shingled. The battens were removed, the shutters were removed, the windows were replaced with double hung windows, and the entire building was shingled as a cheap way to site it. And then it was painted red. In 1929, it became the Art Pavilion, and that was the first year that art classes were held in the building. Birger Sanzane was the teacher. Sanzane was born in Sweden in 1871. He studied art in Stockholm with Anders Zorn, a well-known Swedish artist, and for a short time in Paris. He came to Bethany College in 1894. He remained at Bethany College, becoming the principal art instructor in 1899, and he retired in 1946. He was a very well-known Swedish-American artist. And so here are several photos of art classes being held in the Swedish Pavilion. And this is an art exhibit here in Lindsborg during Holy Week. The college does the Messiah. And so in conjunction with that, it was always an art exhibit. So I assume that this would be as one of the exhibits during Holy Week. And so this is how most people remember the Swedish Pavilion, as the Art Pavilion. By the mid-1960s, the building had started to deteriorate and needed a lot of work. The college no longer needed the pavilion, and they were wanting to get rid of it. In 1969, the Smoky Valley Historical Association in Lindsborg took on the challenge to move the building from the college campus to the Old Mill Museum on the south edge of town. The cost of the move was around $7,000. Volunteers removed plaster from the inside of the building to help lighten the load. And so this is a photo of it sitting on the college campus, again with Old Main there in the background. And here are some photos of the building leaving the college campus. And you can see at this point, it's not in real good shape. And some more photos of it coming down the street. The move to the Old Mill Museum was complete on September the 10th, 1969. And here it is sitting on its foundation there at the Old Mill Museum. Here are some interior photos of the building after the move. I'm sorry, that was the best I could do on that. I tried doing some color correction and photos was just too faded. The crest was broken when it came to the museum. Two college art students did restoration work on it. And then the crest was moved inside to keep it in out of the weather. The chandeliers did not make the move with the pavilion from St. Louis. The chandeliers were reconstructed by a local artist, Malcolm Esping, from photos that we had of the building at the time. And this is Malcolm back here in the background supervising the installation of the chandeliers. And then the building was painted red because that's what everyone remembered it being at the college. Many changes also at this time took place. The front porch was reconstructed. It was similar in design, but was not exact. The side porches were also reconstructed. Again, similar in design, but not exact. And the roof was reshingled, but this time with gray shingles. And the building was then entered into the National Register of Historic Places in March of 1974. The building restoration received more of a community area-wide attention when it was announced that King Carl the 16th Gustav of Sweden would be visiting during the bicentennial. So before the king's visit, work again began on the Swedish Pavilion. A masonite siding with battens was put on to have the appearance of the original siding, and the building was then painted yellow. The king visited the King of Sweden visited Lindsborg in April 1976, and at that time, he rededicated the building. By 1993, the masonite siding was beginning to hold moisture and the trim was deteriorating. The very wet weather of 1993 helped accelerate that damage. A grant in 1995 from the Marcus and Amelia Wallenberg Foundation in Sweden provided funds for a new roof. This time, a dark red shingle was chosen to give it more of that World's Fair appearance. And also funded were foundation repairs and replacement of the chimneys. As you can see that they're up there on the top, replacing the chimneys. In 1998, a Heritage Trust Fund grant from the state of Kansas financed more of the restoration. This financed the removal of the modern siding, that modern masonite siding. And so here you can see that siding coming off. Repair and replacement of the original siding, trim and windowsill repairs, and then repainting the entire structure. And as with any historic construction, there were surprises. Perhaps we shouldn't have been surprised, but we were when we pulled off the masonite siding, and there were all of the nail holes from when the building had been shingled. So work had to stop, and all the nail holes had to be filled in. And then there was the great debate. What color do we paint the building? It was the general consensus that yes, it had been gold, but what shade of gold? After the modern siding came off, you could easily see several different shades of gold. But were these differences just simply caused by weathering? So there were some that wanted us just to simply go back to the red, the way that it had been at the college. Paint samples from the siding and battens were sent to a lab in Boston. We were somewhat surprised at the findings. There had been actually 6 layers of paint on the building. 2 layers of an off-white primer. The next layer was a deep warm tan, not the yellow or gold that everyone expected. Another layer of an off-white, and then 2 layers of a brighter gold. The battens were actually several shades lighter in color than the siding. The shutters and the fence were a sage green, as was the area behind the balcony, and the trim was white. So up here, this is the sage green. This was the fence that was on the fence, and also, like I said, behind the balcony. And then here's the gold. So here is the building after all of that masonite siding has come off. The dark lines here are where the trim work had been that went around the building. And here it is being prepped for painting. And here is the building after it has been painted. And with the battens being several shades lighter, it kind of gave it a shimmering look, really changed the color of it. In 2005, structural problems were found with the east wall. The windows were load bearing. So again, some work was done on that. In 2007, another Heritage Trust Fund grant was received, and this time it replaced all that trim work. So in that other photo where we saw that dark line after the masonite siding came off, this grant replaced that line of trim. So this is how the building looks today if you were to come to the Old Mill Museum. The building faces south, so this is walking in as you look north. This is the crest, and like I said, originally it would have been on the outside of the building. It was moved inside to keep it in out of the weather. So this is looking to the west, and this is looking to the east. The west wing are furnishings from St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Minder, Kansas, which had been destroyed in a tornado. And the east wing has a collection of musical instruments. We use it for special events. We have on our grounds also another historic building, the Smoky Valley Roller Mills. And so every year in May, we have an event called Millfest. And so we use it during that event. We have our Kids Education Day, generally that day prior. So here are some of the kids during that event using the Swedish Pavilion. And then at Christmas time, we have our old-fashioned Christmas, and this building is used for our musical entertainment. And it has absolutely wonderful acoustics, and the groups love singing in the building. It also makes for a wonderful backdrop for our Midsummer's Day Festival held in here in Lindsborg. It's held the third Saturday of June. And here is a photo that I took just this past winter of the building. So as I told you at the beginning of the presentation, that the museum is currently in a transition period. The Old Mill Museum had been owned and funded by McPherson County, Kansas since 1962. On August 1 of this year, ownership of the museum was transferred to a new nonprofit, and the new name of the museum is the Lindsborg Old Mill and Swedish Heritage Museum. The new nonprofit is responsible for the entire property, which includes the Swedish Pavilion. And as the case with all nonprofits, we survive by donations, and we will soon be offering memberships. If you would like to make a donation for the continued upkeep and preservation of the Swedish Pavilion, we would invite you to do that. There is our address, also to PayPal, which is oldmillmuseum@gmail.com. Everyone in the World's Fair Society received a postcard with their last newsletter. This was a gift to you from the museum. We think that these postcards were produced to sell during the King's visit in 1976. I do have still a substantial supply of these postcards. If anyone would like to have more, I'm happy to do that. We're asking for a minimum $10 donation for that, and that would go to the Swedish Pavilion Restoration Fund. Again, I thank you for this opportunity to tell you about the 1904 World's Fair Swedish Pavilion. I invite you to come out and see the building in person. We're an easy drive. We're just straight down I-70 to Salina, Kansas, and then south about 20 minutes on 135. So we invite you to come to Little Sweden. So thank you.
Lenore's Zoom adjusts, and I see that you just ended your screen share. Now we can see everybody. I want everyone, even though you're muted, maybe give a big round of applause to a great presentation. I'm so impressed with all the information that you pulled together, and I appreciate the work that you put into it. I was glad to be able to hook you up with some pictures that you hadn't seen before, and I would imagine some others in Lindsborg really enjoyed seeing some of those construction photos from the public library.
Yeah, those were fantastic. Those were a fantastic collection of photos. Thank you for sharing that.
Right. For myself, I want to, thank you for your work and input. I'm going to send you, as everyone knows, a presenter's piece, for putting this together that you can display on your desk, a nice little paperweight. And it's a great program. I hope you enjoyed putting it together. David, you had a few minutes to take a quick look at the questions. Do you have any to pass on?
I do. Let me go back up to the top here. I know the first question may be more for Diane than anyone. Craig was just wondering, noting the building was transported to Bethany College, raised the question, when was the last building from the 1904 World's Fair removed or demolished?
I really don't know the answer to that. I know there was a, what was it, the cement building at the zoo that was demolished some years ago. The Portland cement building, that's about the latest building that I can think of that, well, one of the buildings on the Washington U campus, I forget which hall it was, that I think was torn down for a parking lot.
That was the British building, I believe, Diane.
Well, I think it was one of the halls. The British building, that went down probably about 10, 20 years after the fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the question is being asked about what were the last buildings on the fairgrounds in Forest Park standing, your latest bulletin has a picture of the lonely Ferris wheel with a facade of one of the buildings, and in front of the Ferris wheel is the life-saving building. So it may have been one of the last in Forest Park. I have no idea how the progress was going on demolishing the Pike buildings, because they belonged to the people that built it, and they were responsible for taking them down. I know Adolphus Busch wanted to keep the Tyrolean Alps up, but they said, no, has to come down, and he eventually took that down also.
So our next question from Larry, since his time was limited, why did President Roosevelt choose to visit the Swedish building, or did he visit all of the nation's buildings? Sounds like a political calculation.
Well, it's also, I'll take a shot at that. It's also limited by time. I've read through the day of his visit, and from getting up into the morning and getting out to the fairgrounds with David R. Francis with a early or late morning reception up in the president's office in WashU, he probably got to 5 or 6 maybe of the foreign buildings that were near WashU. He visited about half of the major palaces, sometimes for only 15 or 20 minutes, because by 4 or 4:30, they took a break and got ready for their big evening reception and dinner, which was held in the Tyrolean Alps, which a couple thousand people attended. There's a famous quote by him, a couple things about his visit. What's her name? The female photographer was always ahead. Yeah, Jessie Tarbox Beals was always ahead of him taking pictures, and he wondered, how's that lady always getting ahead of us to take pictures? And another quote from him was, hey, did you have a good time at the fair? And I think he came back and said, I had a bully time. But, it's kind of like going to Washington, D.C. and trying to see all the museums there in one day. You've only got maybe 15 minutes per museum, and you can't see them all.
But that doesn't answer the question Larry posed. Why was Sweden chosen?
Were the Roosevelts of Swedish heritage?
Well, Roosevelt had actually made 2 visits to Lindsborg, and I think, like I said, it's thought that Carl Aaron Swinson was positioning himself to run for president, so that could maybe perhaps be the connection as to why he made the stop at the Swedish Pavilion.
Sounds good. Got another, David?
Yeah, I've got a few more. I guess this is more of a generic question from Craig. If a historic building was moved, could it still receive National Historic designation? He's under the impression that's not the case. That might require some research.
Well, the pavilion is on the National Register of Historic Places, so, I don't know.
I guess it was determined to be okay enough for that purpose at the time. And then I guess this is along the same lines of the disassembly question from Charles Keeler. Considering the building's been disassembled and reassembled so many times, are there still instructions for constructing it today? I guess did they survive?
Not that I'm aware of.
I can comment on the National Register. Technically, once a building is moved, it has to be relisted. But remember, it was originally listed after it had already been moved from Sweden to St. Louis and from St. Louis to Kansas. It's partly the significance of it is that it was moved, which is unusual for a historic building. And so I'm sure that this move wouldn't affect the historic significance of the building.
The move in Kansas from Bethany College to the museum area was less than a half mile. Is that right, Lenore?
Yeah, that'd be about right.
They sometimes wonder if the changing the orientation of the building in north, south, east, and west changes the design of the building. But it was originally designed to face south, I see from your photos. And what direction does it face now?
It faces south.
Yeah, so that's great. Yeah.
David, any more questions in the chat room?
We have another question about what happened to the bust of the reluctant leader.
We do not know. The only thing that from the pavilion that we know survived, there is a bookcase that was located in Sweden that we know came from the Swedish Pavilion, but none of the other furnishings have been found. So if anybody absolutely knows where the Golden Book is, that is my goal, is to find that. So, or if you know where anything else from the Swedish Pavilion, the chandeliers or anything else, I'd be interested in knowing that.
Have you
Sure, that wouldn't be in Max's basement, would it?
what
She's
about
shaking her head
the
no.
Swedish embassy in Washington? Has anybody ever contacted them?
I don't know, but that's a good thought.
Yeah, because their consul here would have sent materials back there.
Right.
Can anyone hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Bob and I visited there many years ago on our quest to see as many World's Fair sites as possible. And we wanted you all, unfortunately, we can't remember how many years ago it was, but we enjoyed it so much. Everyone was so kind to us. And we stayed in Lindsborg overnight and at a wonderful bed and breakfast type place. And we just had such pleasant memories. And the picture that you have framed right here with you, we have that hanging on our wall.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed your visit to Lindsborg. And if any of you ever come out, make sure you identify yourself and tell us that you're with the World's Fair Society, because I'm always anxious to talk and visit with people about the pavilion.
We unfortunately didn't get to see you. It was two elderly gentlemen, I think, at the time.
As we transition a little bit more now, if you want to unmute yourself to ask a question, feel free to do so. And everyone might want to put their mouse over the Zoom screen, and in the upper right is that little view. If you click on the speaker view, the person that is speaking will appear large. So right now I would appear large in everybody but myself's screen. And if you do have a questions, just go ahead and shout out.
We've got another one here about, and this is more of a background question. What were the wings used for in a traditional farmhouse in Sweden?
Oh, golly, I'm not certain.
To take
don't-
flight,
What are?
to take flight. Now, I noticed something, in one of the photos, the floor, it looked like in the entrance area, it could have been a shadow because of lighting, but is the floor discolored in that area differently than the rest of the floor, wood floor?
Was that in the modern photos?
Yes, I believe it
Okay.
was.
Yes, there is an area that's a little bit different in color. So I am not certain if that was an area of the flooring that was replaced or why the discoloration is there. But yes, it was an area. It wasn't shadows. There is an area.
Thank you.
When we, Bob Herman, when we were there, they had the registrar book with David R. Francis and President Roosevelt and someone else, probably Swede. And I said, would there be any chance to purchase this? And he says, no, we're well financed.
So we do have all of the guest registers from the Swedish Pavilion for the entire time that it was at the fair.
It was a very trendy thing to do at the World's Fair for all the state pavilions and I guess foreign buildings to get people to sign in when they visited their buildings. And Bob was able to rescue the registry books from the Missouri building, which after the fair had found their way, I guess, into an antique dealer. And Bob was able to get a hold of those. So that's why he's, I think, curious about the registry books. I want to point out to everyone that I want to thank Lenore for, the copies of the postcard. When she said she had, boxes of those books, if you'd like those for your members, I jumped on the possibility about a month ago that it would be a great bulletin insert to put in our monthly bulletin that we send out. And of course, this is the one that hopefully everybody has gotten by now. If you haven't gotten this issue of the bulletin, please let me know. I know there's one person, poor David, who hasn't gotten his yet. And I want to thank Jana for putting together the great bulletins that she does, and also Sharon Mercer and her husband Al, that once a month run all over town and get what they need. And this month they had to go buy envelopes and some extra stamps to mail out these issues because the postcard was just a little bit too big to just fit in there and tape up and mail it. They had to go in an envelope. So a shout out to Jana and Sharon for, doing all the work that they do to get the bulletins out.
I want to
Yeah.
add my voice to Mike's and thank Sharon and Al so much, because not only what they do every month is very important to me and the entire membership, it is really, really boring. So another shout out, Sharon, thanks so much.
Well, this year has been a lot of fun for Sharon and myself in our dealings with the post office of mailing out the tubes and the bulletins. and the envelopes and stuff like that. Does anybody have any more questions for Lenora?
We do have one more. I guess it's a very specific question. What percentage of the building is original? I know we saw pictures of it being reconstructed and rehabilitated along the way.
I would say a large percentage of the building is original. Of course, the tile roof was taken off and it was shingled, but all of the siding is original. I mean, I would say everything except for the tile roof is original. Well, the windows, okay, so I take that back. The windows were replaced. So the windows were replaced and the tile roof was taken off, but everything else is original.
Very cool.
Lenore, do you want to point out, you told us this postcard on the back, it says it was, I guess, printed for the visit of the king in 1976. Right. And you've got a large copy of that behind you, the poster size framed up. That I don't know how many of those were made, but those are probably kind of hard to come by.
You can see that. So I'm not sure how big that is. So, so that, yeah, that's the same as the postcard.
Last call for questions for Lenore. Before we move on to a few other notes and discussion here. Okay, one last round of big waves for Lenora.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was fun putting this together.
Well, thank you. It was great, informative, interesting, and there was a bunch of information I learned along our journey, and I'm sure the members have all enjoyed that. We still have almost all the people that signed on. We had over 50 people attend. Okay.